Welcome to this session about hybrid course strategies for success. And when I talk about a hybrid course, I've noticed that you can use the term hybrid course for a variety of different courses, but particularly when I'm talking a hybrid course in this scenario, I'm talking about merging the in-person classroom. So you have a classroom location with an instructor, and you're also teaching via Zoom to a remote classroom, to a remote location. So the perfect example of this is if you're an instructor in Washington, D.C., and you're using Zoom to also instruct your course at a classroom in College Station, Texas. And it can also be vice versa as well. If you could be an instructor in College Station, Texas with an in-person live classroom instructing to a remote location at a remote classroom in Washington, D.C. So we're going to talk about some strategies that can help you be more successful in the teaching and management of your classroom. So when you are starting out and you have a classroom in person and you also have a remote classroom, it definitely is an exercise in multitasking because you are not only focused on your in-person students, you're also running the technology. You're also trying to keep an eye out for your remote students and make sure they're engaged and that they're participating as well. So it can feel like you're trying to juggle many different things. A term that I've heard people use, you have multiple spinning plates and you're running around trying to take care of it. So at first, especially, it can be a challenging task. However, our goal is to get you to where, and I love the pictures on the screen here because you have people who are engaged, they're smiling, they're interacting with each other in the digital and online classroom. And so that's where we want to get to where you're relaxed and comfortable in the hybrid classroom and your students are engaged. So that's the goal and the end game. So what we'll cover today is the face-to-face classroom, how we can combine that with the Zoom remote classroom. And we're going to go over 4 strategies that you can utilize in your classroom. We'll talk about the best practices, and then I will stop the recording and give you a chance to discuss and ask questions. If you're watching this as a recording, please feel free to reach out to me later, and I'm happy to discuss some of the challenges you're facing in the remote and the hybrid classroom and to brainstorm. And hopefully together we can find a solution and some ideas that can help you be even more successful in the hybrid classroom. So my name is Dr. Lisa Marie Brown, and I'm the director of the Office of Extended Education here at the Bush School of Government and Public Service. And you're more than welcome, like I said, to reach out to me, Lisa Brown at tamu.edu. And then my office phone is 979-862-8826. And so what my role here at the Office of Extended Education is I lead the unit that supports 100% online asynchronous graduate programs. So these are programs that we deliver through Canvas, our learning management system. There's no class meeting time, so we utilize a lot of threaded discussion boards. And we also, the Office of Extended Education helps out with academic technology projects as well. And my experience in online learning, first, I'm a longtime Texas A&M University staff member. I've been at Texas A&M University since 1999, and I've been working with online education since 2001 when we launched in the Department of Engineering, the College of Engineering, we launched the Executive Master of Industrial Distribution program, which was the first completely 100% online asynchronous online program here at Texas A&M University. So I've had a lot of experience with digital learning, but then also a lot of experience working with remote audiences through Zoom, both pre-pandemic, in the pandemic, and after the pandemic, and helping faculty work with and test out various instructional strategies for the hybrid environment. So that's a little bit about me and my background. And as I mentioned, the mission of the Office of Extended Education is to extend out extraordinary online graduate opportunities, regardless of location. And so our programs that we support in the Office of Extended Education are not in real time. They're primarily asynchronous. And then we do everything from the recruiting, marketing, admissions to online course design, and even coordinating graduate celebrations. The Office of Extended Education, our secondary role is we assist faculty with Canvas, online learning, and things like this, the webinars and various trainings that have to do with both real-time and asynchronous online learning. And also, I'm an academic liaison for Canvas here at the Bush School. And so what that means, if you do utilize Canvas and have any feedback, please share it. And I share it with the committees and with the Office of Academic Innovation. And we also implement LTI integrations, which are basically kind of what you can equate it to is packages into the learning management system that gives it extra functionality. So that's a little bit about us. What I would like for you to do, and like I said, this will not be in the recording, but in the chat, if you could just share your name and your professional role and just kind of share maybe one of your hobbies. And while you're doing that in the chat, and you should see the chat button at the bottom of the screen, I'll share with you kind of my passion besides digital learning and online learning is I love to run. So if you see me running, don't worry, nothing's chasing me. It's just one of my hobbies. I enjoy to run. And then also I love spending time with my family. So that's one of my joys in life. And that's a little bit about me personally. And so, excellent. Thank you for those of you participating in the chat. Very good. It's nice to learn a little bit more about everyone. And I enjoy the outdoors as well, too. I'm outside every chance I get. All right. So why did I ask everyone to do that little chat activity? And the reason why, because one great strategy in the hybrid classroom is building your connections with your students. So typically when you have everyone in one classroom, there's time for everyone to come in. The students, they'll chat among themselves, and then the faculty member will often chat with the students. And it's a very informal opportunity for students to connect on a relationship basis one-on-one and start building building trust with each other and learning more about each other. So one of the things I ask you to consider is think about how you can build in some informal networking time. So perhaps the first few minutes of class, you just have an informal welcome all the students. And then you ask your remote site, the site in College Station, how are you doing today? And so one of the challenges that you may face in the remote class is if you have a classroom, you may only have one camera and one computer on Zoom. So one of the things that you can think about doing, and that I've seen faculty do, is you can have a spokesperson for the group, a student helping out and asking, okay, College Station, how how did the course reading go this week? How are you doing this week? And make sure that you get that remote site participation in the formal networking. If you do have all your students on their own computers within the classroom, and then you can ask them to do something like chat and tell me, where do you call home? And just kind of think about how you can do an icebreaker or get some sort of informal networking to build that class connection. So, for example, I once had a instructor who used puzzles and brain teasers the first 5 minutes of every class just to kind of get everyone relaxed and thinking. And it was a neat exercise that instructor did to make it a little more to lessen, I guess you could say, some of the anxiety that the students were feeling and to get them excited and engaged into the classroom. And so another example is you can even start off, okay, if there's some sort of comment on a current event or things like that, just some way to start building the connection with the other students. Strategy 2, you definitely want to think of ways to keep engaging the students. So in talking with various faculty who do have a hybrid classroom and give remote sessions from DC to College Station and vice versa, a lot of their strategy was, well, I just be sure to tell students that I'm going to call on them. So if you set that expectation and tell the students, hey, be prepared to be called on by name and be asked to participate during class, that does help so that you can get that engagement. Another strategy that one instructor I talked to used was he would actually send the discussion questions for the classroom session to the students in advance. And would tell them, these are the questions that we're going to discuss today, at the next class. Be prepared to discuss these questions. And what that did is, one, it helped the students prepare for class, but it also set that expectation. The students knew that whenever they were coming into the classroom, that they were expected to engage, even if they were remote students. And if you have students in a remote classroom, and you do ask them to discuss, if there's only one microphone, you can set the expectation when it's time for you to discuss, step up to the microphone, be sure that we can see you and hear you. And another great way to engage the students is to be sure you just check in on your remote students. Ask them, how are you doing? College Station location, what are your thoughts? I've also known faculty have had a lot of success having student helpers at their remote location. So they'll just identify a student, or either they'll have a different student help out each week. And they'll have that student helper do things like be the spokesperson in the chat room or in Zoom, or either they'll help with the remote site camera, making sure that the camera is zeroed in on the person speaking, making sure that the volume's appropriate and everyone can hear what is being said. The thing on the student helpers is that when you do have a student helping out in the classroom, my recommendation is to make sure that you're very specific with the student and what you want them to do. So, for example, if you want the student to make sure that they're heard at the other side, you just have to let that student know. But you can task students with doing things like taking roll at the remote site. And because one of the things that I recommend doing, if you do have a student who is absent, check in with that student. In the online environment, in the digital environment, it's so easy for a student to just kind of not show up, and we may not notice them as much. So follow up and see, hey, I noticed you weren't at class. Is everything going okay? And then also you can appoint discussion leaders with the remote location and with your in-class location as well. So and that can work different ways. You can have someone be the spokesperson for the group, gathering the information and sharing it with the remote site, or you can even have a discussion leader who perhaps leads the discussion and engages in the classroom for a specific date of your class. So those are just some of the ideas and some of the strategies that faculty have used as far as students helping out in the classroom. If you're looking to get engagement between students, so for example, you want the DC students to interact with the College Station students more, you may even want to consider a group work assignment. And so you have an assignment where you pair up a remote student, a DC student with a College Station student and have them have a meeting outside the classroom in Zoom and work on a project together. And that can be another way that you can really get students connecting and working together and making connections, essentially. Strategy 3 is to prepare for your hybrid and remote classroom and set the expectations early in the class. And so the first bullet point that I have here is netiquette. So for your remote classroom, what are your expectations of the students? And I have a handout that I will email to you. Also, I'll email this presentation and some other handouts after the presentation. But I specifically have a handout about in Zoom, some of the best practices in Zoom, for example, being professional. When you do step into the classroom, you want to act as if the microphone's always on. Know that it's a public place. So I have some netiquette handouts that I can send you that you can consider using for your classroom. But some of the things that I always like to stress are things like professionalism, letting the instructor know if you can't see the presentation, letting the instructor know if you can't hear, and having students be vocal and just speaking up. And I think that helps if they know it's okay to unmute yourself and say, I can't hear, or I can't see what you're showing me. Also have those set classroom procedures on what they should do if they're absent, sick, makeup work, and check in with the students often. Make sure that you're viewing the remote site students, trying to look for body language if you can, make sure they're engaged, and asking questions a lot, I think, helps to make sure that they are absorbing the information and that they are engaged. As far as efficiency goes, one way, of course, is the preparation, but sharing the agenda for the classroom session in advance, sharing any handouts you want the students to refer to for the classroom session, sharing your discussion questions in advance. All those things will help you be more efficient in the classroom, because then the students already have the handouts for the lecture, and they can either pull them up on their computer or they can print them out if they're a print person. So just anything you can to support and help the classroom in advance is going to make you more efficient. Some of the expectations you set for Zoom and the on-campus classroom, some things to consider include, will you call on students? Will you share the discussion questions in advance? Hand raising. Is it a small enough classroom so that the remote classroom can just unmute and interject? Do you want them to interject, or do you prefer that they raise their hand if they have a question? Is that your preference of the remote location and the in-person location? So just kind of think through some of those procedural things, what facilitates the classroom the best. And I will say that not every procedure is going to be right in the same context or the same classroom, because you do have to consider your classroom size and, of course, the equipment that you have in your classroom. And that will help you. And so analyzing those things. Also, you can share Zoom guidance sheets. One consideration is, do you want to allow chat or not allow chat in your security settings? If you don't want them to unmute yourself, of course, in Zoom, you can set your security settings so that people cannot unmute themselves. And also, if students have technical difficulty, do they have a support number to call at the remote site? Do they have your contact information if they are in real time having a technical difficulty and can't access Zoom or access their equipment? So some of those things can really help facilitate that classroom and serve as a great backup plan. Also, just being flexible. And I'd say that when you're dealing with technology, like today, 1 hour before the session, I got an email that said, be advised that our connection could be down this afternoon and it could go out at any time because there's emergency electrical maintenance. So when I found that out, I started thinking of a backup plan. And I just was sure to communicate that before this session began. So communicating to students at the beginning of a classroom, if you think there will be technical hiccups, if there is a chance the network may go down, and people understand that, technology problems do happen, hiccups happen. And so just planning for that ahead and then communicating. So let's say worst case scenario, the whole network goes down. Well, you're prepared, and from your cell phone, you can send an email. Okay, well, class was cut short, but here's the rest of the information you need. So just think about those things. And also don't be afraid to try new things. So if you realize that, one discussion strategy isn't working. So if you try something, you have student discussion leaders and it's not working well, try something else. So don't be afraid to try something and see what fits for your classroom and your circumstance. And again, just checking in and calling on students really helps. Sometimes the classroom may not have the best microphone, so you may have to repeat the student question, especially if it's a large classroom and there's not good audio. So just consider that. So after a student asks a question, did everyone hear that? Did you hear Lisa's question? And let the students know you expect them to answer, that you expect them to unmute, say yes or no, and to participate. Also, just pay attention to your webinar camera display. So at the beginning of class, if you notice the remote site, the camera's off, it needs to be zoomed in more on the students, let them know. So just as you start your class and set it up, just pay attention to what that webinar camera is picking up. And if you're here in College Station, there are Instructional Media Services handles most of our classrooms. So we have the number for them if there's any classroom technical issues. And I know at Washington, D.C., the classrooms have IT support numbers posted. What I recommend is go ahead and put it in your cell phone, because invariably the technical glitch happens when there's a guest speaker or something like that, and you're really pressed for time. So just keep those support numbers handy. And practice before your hybrid class begins. Once you know where your hybrid class is going to be, where your in-person class will be situated, you can ask someone like me to join you in Zoom. I'm happy to do so, and to test things out and to test the camera out and the aspect ratios. Preferably, if you know what remote class you're going to be in College Station, I'll join from that site and you can join from the DC site. So testing things out, highly recommend it. And that helps make a smoother class. Just be sure to tour your in-person class and practice with the technology. That can really save a lot of time. Now, strategy 4 is use your tools. Now, I know that, so what we're talking about is considered electronic to group. You have one group in one location, Washington, D.C., for example, and then you have another group in classroom in a remote location, and you're teaching via Zoom, so College Station. So typically when that happens, you don't have every individual in Zoom. You only have the 2 classroom locations. And from what I understand, sometimes an individual may have 3 classroom locations. So if you have a classroom location and not everyone's in Zoom, well, certainly that makes the Zoom polling more difficult because you're not having all the individuals respond. It's either your poll will be one site response, and maybe you'll have one student who's serving as the voice of the site and another. So there are some tools that I'm going to show you where, so it's called Mentimeter.com, where you can have students on, if they have their smartphone and a browser, you can poll them and they use their smartphone. So that's an option that I think that you can use rather than the Zoom poll, since not everyone's in Zoom. And I'm about to show you that. But if you ever do want help on how to create a Zoom poll and have it ready for your class, I'm happy to show you to do that. There are some other tools that you can use in Zoom that are really helpful. When you screen share, there's the Zoom annotation tool. And with that tool, you can write text on the slide, you can draw on the slide, and then you can even save the slide for later. You can also use the whiteboard tool, and that's 12 pages that you can draw on, that you can also put text on. And then Zoom has some great breakout groups functionality. Now, I know one thing, if you do want to use breakout groups during the classroom, if not everyone's on Zoom individually, then of course you have to essentially have your breakout groups be location based. So you'd have some in-person breakout groups in College Station and some in-person in DC. And the only other option with the Zoom breakout groups is to have individuals, again, joining with their cell phone. And the hardest part of that, the biggest consideration you have to think about is the microphone feedback issue, because then typically the speaker would have to have their microphone muted so you don't get a lot of feedback. So that's the hardest part about the Zoom breakout groups. So it might actually make the group work easier to do it by location. But first, I want to show you the Menti polling tool that I mentioned, and because it's really a great tool that I think you will like. And so I'm going to move my Mentimeter website over here. And can everyone see it? If so, if you can give me a thumbs up in the reactions. Can you see the site? It says... Oh, awesome. Okay. So I've dragged over my Menti site. So I'm going to go ahead and click present, and you can do this in advance of class. Okay. So I'm going to present this. All right. So what I'd like you to do, if you have a cell phone handy, or if you can even open another tab in your browser, what I'd ask you to do is to open up on your smartphone a browser tab and go to menti.com. So you're going to go to menti.com. And what you're going to do is you're going to type in this code 3865-1947. 3865-1947. And hit submit. Okay, great. We have individuals already answering the question. Very good. 3865-1957. So this is a way that you can easily poll your students without them having to be in Zoom. You just give them the heads up, hey, be sure if you have a smartphone with browser and internet access, bring it to class because we're going to do some live polling. And it's a really great option and a nice way to get engagement with all of your classes individually and submit the poll. Okay. And so I'd highly recommend using it. And then, so I can see here, this is my instructor screen, and I can show the results of the poll, and it gives me the percentage. So what is the name of the office that supports 100% online graduate programs of the Bush School? Everyone got it right, the Office of Extended Education. And then over here, what I do is I can go ahead and move to the next slide. And I'm going to open my polling. So the next question that I have for you is, what is a successful teaching strategy that you have used in the hybrid in-person remote classroom? And so again, share one of those strategies that you use in the hybrid and remote classroom. And so let's see. I'm going to go into Menti and Mentimeter. Okay, excellent. So we have a couple of strategies already. So some great strategies in the hybrid or remote classroom is using an assistant and calling on people. So those are just two strategies. So I really enjoy Mentimeter, and the great part about it is it's a free tool. So you can poll your students, you can even ask them open-ended question, and in real life time, you can get that answer from everyone. Successful teaching strategy, entrance and exit tickets. So I'd be interested to learn more about that. Initiate a discussion. Absolutely. I think the more that you can be interactive in the class, that's a great strategy. All right, excellent. And so then I'm going to go ahead and close the voting on this and exit out of that. Okay. And the next tool, so that Mentimeter is a great way to engage instead of the Zoom poll. But another wonderful tool that I enjoy, I wanted to share with you, is Padlet.com. And it is another free tool that you can use. So let me go back to the slide. So if you go to tinyurl, oops, and I'm going to put this in the chat so that you can hyperlink to it, that if you can go to tinyurl.com/OEE Padlet. So on your smartphone, please go to tinyurl.com, and I'll do the same. tinyurl.com/OEE Padlet. All right. And it came up on my cell phone here. And so this is another way, just a unique way, unique tool that you can drive some engagement in the classroom. And if your students are anything like my teenagers and the students I know, they love being on their cell phone. And so reading thoughts, share a key takeaway from the reading. And so welcome and share your thoughts. Before the next class, share a key takeaway you learned from this week's reading. We'll use this to launch our next classroom discussion. So you can do something like this before class or even during class. Have students open up Padlet. And all they do is they click on this plus sign, the purple plus sign, and they can respond. So for example, a takeaway from the reading. So maybe a student says, I think the reading, hopefully they'll say more than I think the reading was great. But they can respond on this Padlet and publish. So now if you refresh the screen, and I'll bring Padlet over, you will see the student's comment in there. So, oh, very good. So we even have another instructor who put test. I like the reading, and I put the reading was great. So it's just a nice way, a unique way that you can get more interaction and some discussion from the students. It's a fun tool. And also these tools are great when you have virtual meetings, virtual conferences, and they're just really fun tools to utilize and get students engaged in. All right. Also, I wanted to give you the heads up that on the when you do have long URLs to send to students, you shorten them with tinyurl.com. For example, this tinyurl.com/OEE Padlet, it was a super, super long URL. And I was able to shorten it. So think about things like that when you're sharing links with students, or hyperlink the link. So if you're sending the presentation in advance, you can hyperlink it and the students can just click and access it. But definitely pay attention to the links of your hyperlinks to make it easy for the students. Another great tool is called Kahoot.com. And that one is a trivia tool. You can do a lot of neat trivia games with it. And again, that tool is free. There is an educational version so that you can get all the bells and whistles. And that educational version is only $60 a year. So that's another great tool. Also, I'd highly recommend consider using the learning management system Canvas to deliver your content and your grades to students. So in Canvas, you can put all the course readings, if you have instructional materials, worksheets. And the beauty of that is you don't have students coming back and saying, oh, I lost that email you sent me with week 2's PowerPoint. Can you send it to me again? So it's a great place so you can have all your content in at the same place. You can even set up all your assessments, essays, projects, grades in it. It has a really beefy grade book. You can set up threaded discussion boards so students can participate in advance of the classroom and post messages on the discussion boards. And the best thing, it's NetID authenticated. So it is a secure, password protected environment. When students do log into Canvas, it verifies their identity. And automatically, courses, a few weeks before the semester begins, the Office of Academic Innovation at Texas A&M University creates every course at A&M with a Canvas, what's called a Canvas shell, which is basically a Canvas course, and they load all the students in there. Now, students won't see that course unless you manually go in there and publish it, but it's already there waiting for you. So if you were to go to canvas.tamu.edu, you would see an unpublished empty course, and it has a basic Texas A&M University shell, but your students are listed in the grade book. Canvas, I can do a whole nother session on Canvas. Also, if you're individually interested, I can give you the resources and get you started on Canvas, or one of my team can do so. But I will give you this caution. It does take a while to set up your Canvas course and to put the content in, set up the gradebook. However, once you set it up, you can copy that course to your next semester's course when it opens up. So there's a really easy copy export material. So you set it up once and basically you can move it forward to other semesters. The only thing you may have to edit, of course, would be your deadlines, but there's even a bulk deadline editing feature in Canvas. So something to consider for future semesters that you may want to utilize Canvas. Also, in your first meeting with your students, just be sure to go over those procedures, share your agendas, share your materials prior to class. That really helps so students can get prepared. And also look at the camera when you speak so you can make that eye contact with the remote students. If you're in a small class, you can use the gallery view so you can see everyone, and just instruct your student helper to be sure that whenever class begins, that the focus of the camera is on the students, and so you can see everyone and hopefully see their body language. Also, I highly recommend in Zoom, make sure your auto transcription is set up. That way, if you do have individuals with hearing impairments, they can see what you're saying. They could see it on the screen. And that can also help if individuals learn best by seeing the words rather than hearing the words, and it can be very helpful. And then just prepare for your lesson. Think about each lesson beforehand. What objectives do you have? What activities do you typically do in the in-person classroom, and how can you translate that to the remote classroom? You may even want to consider giving an overall participation grade for the semester and the engagement. And that's another great idea, so they know not only is it expected, you'll be assessed on your participation. And also be flexible and try new things. And if it doesn't work, don't be afraid to change it. I would like you to think about academic integrity also. How can you make sure that the work the student's submitting is theirs, and discuss the Aggie Honor Code, that Aggies do not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those that do. So to really encourage students to not cheat. So for example, if you have students writing essays, there is a program called Turnitin that will flag anything that appears to be plagiarism or that isn't cited correctly. And sometimes, particularly for our students, they've been out of school a while, we have to remind them, here's how you correctly cite. And remember, you can't take a phrase and claim it as your own. You need to cite the material. So just think about some of those academic integrity issues. And also make sure those exam procedures that you have are the same at your in-person site as your Zoom site or your remote site. So for example, you wouldn't want to give a take-home exam to your remote students, but require your in-person students to be proctored and monitored by you. You just want to make sure you have the same exam procedures. So if I'm giving a take-home exam to one, I'll give it to all. Or if I'm going to proctor one site, I need to proctor and Zoom the other site. So some things to consider. And just remember, think of both of your students, even if you have to write a sticky note that says remote and put it on your screen or somewhere that you see it. Just remember both sides of the students. And the microphone's always on. So go into the classroom thinking that the microphone's on. Remember to share your screen, and you can use the annotation tool, which I find really helpful. So for example, here I'm circling annotation tool right now. You can highlight points to your remote audience, and you can clear all the drawings. Students will see you. Just keep in mind, they'll see you. They'll see what you share on the screen and what you project on the screen, but they won't necessarily see your body language if you're too remote from the camera. So if you can try to focus in and have it set closer on you so they can see your body language and what's important. Also, just keep in mind, you may not necessarily see in classroom peers if they're outside of the camera's view. If you hold up a small object, the students may not be able to see it. So you may have to purposefully put it in front of the camera. Like when I was demonstrated with my smartphone, I had to get closer. Also, I'll realize that you may not hear side audience. You may hear students laughing, but not know what was said. So feel free to go, oh, I hear laughter. Can you share with me what I missed? So that way, again, they know that you're tuned to the audience and that you're paying attention to what is going on. So just some important things to think about and when you're teaching in the online classroom. All right. And then, and again, please do encourage your students to speak up if they can't see you, hear you, and things like that. So encourage them, set that expectation. And then if they tell you later on, oh, by the way, I couldn't see that map that you showed in Zoom. Tell them, well, in the future, be sure you tell me right away. I want to know if you can't hear or see. And that way they know too that you care about their experience and interested. And ask questions. Expect that all students respond. Can you hear me? All students should be responding to your questions. So summing up, our teaching strategies for the hybrid classroom are strategy 1, build those connections with the students, find ways so that you can connect with them also informally. Strategy 2, engage the students, do what you can to get them talking and to speak up, whether it be on the volume, the sound, or the questions that you ask in the hybrid classroom. Strategy 3 is to prepare for the hybrid classroom and set your expectations with the students. Make sure the students understand, if it's that they can be called on for any question, and that you expect them to be prepared to discuss that material. And strategy 4 is to use the tools that you have. Utilize the Zoom annotation tool. You can utilize things like Mentimeter.com or Canvas to deliver all your course materials to students. So those are some tips and best practices for the hybrid classroom. I also want to share that we have resources for you. So Texas A&M University has a Keep Teaching site, and it's keepteaching.tamu.edu. And on that website, they have links to all kinds of Canvas videos. They have links to various training, instructional support. The only thing to keep in mind is some of it may be a little more customized to the College Station campus, but I think you'll find a lot of it is still very applicable to what you do. Also, there's a Keep Learning site for students that gives students tips on the digital learning environment, and that's keeplearning.tamu.edu. Anyone, faculty or staff or students, can call Texas A&M University's IT support, and that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they can call and get help. And that number is 979-845-8300, helpdesk@tamu.edu. And also I have the links to canvas.tamu.edu if you want to use that tool. And you're also more than welcome to set up an appointment with me. I'm happy to discuss strategies and brainstorm and help you as well. So thank you all so much for attending this session. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording and stop the recording. But again, thank you for joining the session about hybrid course strategies for success. Bye.